All right.
Welcome back to Worldhoppers. This is a collaborative booktube channel where we geek out on books and all of the profits go to charity. Today, we are reacting to some viewers' most surprising and most disappointing books of the year. And we have a couple of guests with us, and I will let them introduce themselves now.
Hello, everybody. I am Bethany from Beautifully Bookish Bethany. I read a lot of books, like 300-ish a year, pretty widely, but a big emphasis on science fiction, fantasy, and romance.
And I'm Mara from Books Like Whoa. I also read about 300 books a year. That's why me and Bethany are buds. And I'm an omnivore. I read everything from classics to romance to mystery, but I also read a lot of sci-fi fantasy. So I read it all and I've got opinions about it all.
And that's why we invited the two of them, because they read a lot and a lot of different things. So we figured no matter what you guys send in as surprising or disappointing, maybe we'll have opinions on it.
More likely with them.
So we're actually going to start. Some of the books that people submitted were listed a lot, both in surprising and disappointing. So we're going to start with those ones. And one of the ones that got brought up the most was The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue for disappointing and surprising.
That clocks.
I have not.
I have not read it. Yeah.
I've read part of it.
Oh no!
So I haven't read it. I will say I was loving what I was reading, but it was the sort of book where I kind of wanted to be able to take my time with it, because it's just like, it's the kind of thing I didn't want to go through quickly. I can totally see why it would be, based on at least what I have read, I can totally see why it could be surprising and disappointing to people, because it's very different from anything else she's written. And so I feel like people who love most V.E. Schwab stuff and like that's really their deal might not like it, because it's a very different sort of book. It's a much slower paced, like character driven, thoughtful sort of story, which with beautiful writing, like I'm really enjoying it, but it's super different. So
you're going to revisit it later? You're not giving up on it?
No, I want to read it. It's just the sort of one where I'm like, I need to be in the right headspace where I can sit and really focus on it and enjoy it, because I feel like I wouldn't get as much out of it if I just like kind of blew through it.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. It's definitely one I want to read. I just haven't gotten around to it. I don't read a ton of new releases usually, but I feel like I've heard lots of good things and lots of bad things. I've definitely heard mixed things. So not mixed things like people have mixed feelings, but some people love it and some people don't. So I'm not surprised that it came up a lot for both of these.
Same. Yeah.
Another
Jesse,
one.
did you read it?
I haven't read it yet.
No? Okay. I know you like V. Schwab, so I was curious.
I do. I'm very excited to read it, but I have not gotten to it yet.
I know. I want to read it too. But it's funny because some people think it's the most moving thing in the world, and then not literally, and then other people are like, this book is stupid. And I've seen people disappointed because they thought it was going to be more romance heavy. And I never got that vibe from the premise.
No.
I was really anticipating it, but I was also hesitant because I am not like a V.E. Schwab stan necessarily. I've felt pretty lukewarm about what I have read. So and the premise sounds amazing, but that's always what happens with the books of hers that I have read, where I'm like, this sounds so cool. And then I'm like,
It's like, it sounds awesome. And then I get into it and I'm like, this is just not...
It's not doing
what I'm really wanting it to be. Yeah. And I really had a problem structurally with the Darker Shades of Magic trilogy. So
yeah, that's fair.
I don't know. If it's really different than what she normally does, then that actually might be enticing to me, because I've been a little so-so with her so far.
It is quite different. I liked the Shades of Magic trilogy more than you did, I think, but I think I just really liked the world a lot. And it felt very,
the world was really cool.
Yeah.
Bethany, have you read Vicious and Vengeful?
I read Vicious. I haven't read Vengeful yet.
Would you say
I liked it. It's also very different. I think this is the thing, is she writes very different kinds of books, but this is not like anything else I've read from her. It's it's almost like barely fantasy. Like it's got like
Right.
a slight sort of fantastical element to it, but it's this very slow, poetic kind of like character-driven story.
I feel like the thing that unites all of her books is they always have this dark kind of atmosphere to them or feeling. Even though the premise is always different or the writing is different or the tone is different, that I don't know, they all kind of are a little twisted and a little dark in a way, just like a hint edgy.
Yeah.
Another one that came up a lot, and Deshauna, I know you'll have opinions, is House of Earth and Blood for both of them, surprising and disappointing.
I mean, that makes sense.
Yeah,
it makes sense because it's friggin' like 800 plus page book, and the first like 200 pages, 150 to 200 pages are kind of like, they're really slow. But then the last 200 pages are just, phenomenal. Wild ride. Great time. But I could see like people who don't love Sarah J. Maas being really like, what the heck? This whole beginning part. Ugh, I didn't care because I was just so happy to be in another Sarah J. Maas world. So I didn't care. I was like, it's fine. It's a lot of info dump. I don't care. Like, I know it's going to get great. I don't give a crap. So, yeah. But it makes sense. So
I don't think she's going to win over anyone. Like, my theory is that if you didn't like Sarah J. Maas before, you're still not going to like her.
Oh, no.
Mic drop.
Sarah J. Maas mess you out. She's like, I can too convert people with my book.
No, it's true. I mean, like, I do think it's a step up from what she's written. Like, I think it's like the best of her books that she's written so far, but it's still very much a Sarah J. Maas book. So, like, if you hate the way she writes, you're not going to like it.
It's the opposite of V.E. Schwab. Like, they're not really different from each other.
Yeah. I really enjoyed it. It was fun. Her books are too long. Like, I don't think she gets edited enough anymore because she's such a big bestseller.
And that's why I decided not to read it, because I heard that, and that is one of my biggest pet peeves in a book. And I was probably,
that would probably annoy you. I didn't really care because I was still having a good time, even though I was like, this should have been probably 150 pages shorter, but I'm still having fun, so it's okay.
Yeah.
Do you guys think? Do you think that that's common for best-selling authors that after a while they just? Because
sorry. I was going to say, I just saw someone. Did someone post it on their Instagram? Where did I see it? Talking about, or was it on Twitter? George R. R. Martin in like an old interview with the first book, and him, or was it the first one? I don't know, one of the earlier books, and him being like, this one is a little bit long. Or no, was it George R. R. Martin?
It was Sanderson.
It was Brandon Sanderson. Yeah. Did you post it?
Yeah.
That was so interesting to me because, he was like, it's not going to be this long. And then it's like progressively each book is longer and longer and longer.
There was like this interview when the first book, The Way of Kings, came out where it was, I don't remember how many words it was, but he was talking about the word length and saying like, the rest of them won't be this long, I promise. I just couldn't cut down this first one. And they like, each one is longer.
And he was saying like the publisher was like, could this please be shorter? And he's like, no, the rest will be, I promise.
What's funny is Sean noticed in one of the books that somebody says something like, the sequels always have to be longer in the book. Like a character says that. And Sean was like, Sanderson, don't follow this. Please stop making them all longer. So I was almost wondering too, if it gets to a point, because I've heard Sanderson talk about how when he's writing, they have it set up now where pretty much as soon as he's done, he doesn't have to wait a really long time for the book to come out. It just comes out basically as soon as he's ready, because the publishers, I mean, he didn't say this, but they essentially like cater, they trust these authors now. So I almost wonder if he writes and then he hands it to the editor, and then the editor just like gets like I don't know how many times.
Like a line edit, but there's no meaningful.
That's what it sounds like.
That makes me so mad, actually, not just on behalf of readers, but on behalf of the author, because actually that is ultimately who is not being served well by that. Because editing is as important as I mean, like, a good editor can take a good book from good to amazing.
Right.
Like, and you need somebody else who has perspective that you just can't have being close to the book. So like that actually, it makes me angry, but it also makes me kind of sad for him, because I think he's losing the opportunity to have even better work that possibly could stand the test of time maybe a little bit more than just the immediate market of like, yeah, you know, we'll read whatever you give us. Like that, whew, I don't
And
like
I
that.
feel like he has this reputation of being the fantasy guy who gets his books out quick. And so
I mean, props to him on that, like for not making his fans wait for
20 years or something.
Whatever it is. But
what I think is really fascinating too is following young adult authors is I'll see them have so much pressure, be like, I gotta hit this deadline. I like never see that from, I mean, not that it doesn't happen, but I feel like adult fantasy authors have to hit a deadline and then they just wait until the publishers are like, okay, this is when your book's going to come out. As opposed to Sanderson, who is like, he'll post like, just finally finished the final draft. It's at 100% on his website. And then it's like, okay, cool. That means it will come out in November. That's crazy to me that he's like updating. And then as soon as you see that, you're like, okay, cool. It's going to come out now.
Yeah.
And I mean, again, no shade to him. Because like,
sorry, I was going to say, like, I think I heard him or somebody like that talk about, though, it's possible his editor is doing it in chunks that he sends like a few hundred pages at a time because they are so long.
Yeah, I'm sure that they are, but like that's not the same as doing a full edit of a completed book. I don't know. I think in general in speculative fiction, I'm on the end of things that I tend to be pickier about, like in general for any genre. I think books have to earn their length. And so like, I think there's a lot of speculative fiction readers who are kind of more on the end of like more description, the better, like more, just give me more. And that is really not my attitude. I'm like, if it's there, it needs to be there for a reason. So I'm probably more picky about that. But I really appreciate Sanderson's commitment to his fans to have things out. Like, I think that is awesome. Yeah. And honestly, shame on whoever his editors or his publishing house is for knowing that they can make money off of whatever gets put out under his title or under his name.
I'm to a point too where I'm like, why do you even have a publisher? Because like, I mean, honestly, I'm sure contracts and stuff, but so sorry to everybody who's like, is this just going to be like,
sorry.
I feel like this is an interesting side tangent we're on here, but I almost feel like, I don't know, his like Dragonsteel, that whole thing. So little story time. I had emailed the publisher, like I found the exact person. They're like at the top of knowing for Tor about arcs. And they're like, they've straight up said, we don't have print arcs. And then later I got messaged from like Sanderson's assistant asking if I wanted an arc. And I'm like, what? Like the discrepancy with the publisher.
We don't have them.
So it's like, and then I think Dragonsteel even sometimes has to give permission to other, I don't know all the details. Obviously I'm not a part of it, but I just think that's kind of crazy. And if you look at the Leatherbound Way of Kings Kickstarter, the amount of money that it made, I'm like, dude, you could just start your own publishing company for all of your books. Like you have enough of them.
Yeah. Honestly, that's one of the main reasons you would even be at a major publisher is to get that kind of editorial and marketing support. Like editorial and marketing, that's really the benefit of being with a traditional publisher. If you're not getting the editorial, he's a big enough name. He can pay someone to do the marketing and he'll recoup it and then some.
I also just want to say, whoever his editor is, I hope they don't think we're like
no, I don't blame any one person. It's like and also you think about the entire publishing house. He is like supporting all of the smaller authors. Like there's all these different financial pressures. Like no individual shade to any one person. It's just like I'm just bemoaning the general state of where we are in publishing, where that is something that happens.
Do you think maybe the opposite is happening? That Dragonsteel is pushing like. They want it out soon instead of the publisher.
Pushing him?
Not pushing him, but like telling the publisher, like, no, we don't want to wait. We want it out in November.
Maybe.
Like the opposite.
Could be. So this conversation, Mara.
Sorry, I didn't mean to derail us with my rant against the need for editors.
So I'm curious. I don't know if this is on the list of books you have, but what this makes me think of is reviews I'm starting to see come out of Black Sun, which I know Mara and I both loved.
That was on there.
But the more negative reviews I'm seeing are people who want it to be longer. It's mostly people, it is. Hey, yeah. No, it's interesting because a lot of people are saying like, I want more world building. I like it, but it's not enough. I like it, but I wanted more. It was too short. And like,
so you're gonna get more.
Yes.
I mean, yes, I agree.
And like, I just
love
don't,
it, but
I mean, everybody has different tastes, but for me, I'm just befuddled because like what I love about this book is that it's just like, do we swear on this channel?
We try not to.
Okay, we try not to. Okay. What in the world is going on? Like the opening scene of this book is one of the most banana pants things I've ever read. And you're just like, what is happening? And I love the mystery. I mean, like, I think you get quite a bit of description and world building in this, but there's a lot of questions that I assume will be addressed
later.
Yeah, as it goes on.
I love how you asked if you can curse, and then you use the term banana pants. But okay, so Black Sun was listed as surprisingly good, like not disappointing. It was only listed under what I saw, but I've seen other people say that online. You know, saying like, you know, Bethany, you were saying that seems to be a complaint about the world building. But I also think that sometimes we have certain expectations of fantasy based off of older fantasy, like something like Robert Jordan, which I think is very description heavy. And sometimes is it that we want more because it would serve the book, or do we want more because that's what we're used to and like that's what we think
is good fantasy.
Like what somebody's standard fantasy is, right? Because like a Sanderson fan, for example, also is used to getting a lot of description and a lot of explanation about the world.
I feel like it's plenty long. I haven't read it yet.
I agree.
Really
it's like 500 pages. It's not like it's a.
I mean, I love it. Like, I think it's.
Shauna's gonna check.
Yeah, check
it now.
I wasn't a fan of her other series. I only read the first book, but I decided not to continue.
I wasn't either.
I said that this one was different and better.
Very
different. I'm excited to read it.
It's a very different vibe. She has a similar project, I think, in both in terms of some of her thematic ideas. But Trail of Lightning, all of that is urban fantasy, and this is definitely high fantasy.
Yeah. And I think that's where my issue was. Like, I'm not a huge fan of urban fantasy,
I
didn't really realize that until I read Trail of Lightning, and I was like, oh, this is.
I do like.
It's very different
urban fantasy, but I didn't dislike Trail of Lightning. I just was like,
it's just meh.
Yeah.
All right. I guess so. I was nervous about this one, but I bought it because it sounded great, and I knew it was from the description that it was high fantasy. I was like, this might be it, and I really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
To switch gears here, one that was said in surprisingly good, and I thought this would be in bad more. There may have been a couple, but I saw this pop up a lot in good. Two that I was surprised about were Grisha and Folk of the Air. I feel like I was expecting those to be more in bad because that's kind of these series go in waves. Like they go in, everybody loves it, everybody hates it. And then like I feel like we're creeping back up to like, maybe people like it after all.
Yeah. So I read the first two books in Folk of the Air this year, and I was surprised that I liked it as much as I did based on what I'd heard people say about it and like the way people talk about the romance. I'm not a huge like enemies to lovers fan, so I was really hesitant about that. But I actually really enjoyed the first two books. I haven't read the third one yet, but I'm going to read it soon. And honestly, like I probably shouldn't have been surprised because I've liked other books by Holly Black before. But just I thought out of all of her books that this would be the series I wouldn't like, but I ended up really enjoying it.
I haven't picked it up. I don't think I'm interested in it for some reason. I don't know why.
I read the first book and I really liked it, but I haven't continued because I think I read it differently than other people. And based on like things I've heard about the way the series goes, because like, okay, look, when I read the first book, I was like, this is so great. And I didn't think it was romantic. Like, I was like, this is not a romance. This is just like about, like bullying being a problem and about like different ways of getting revenge. But apparently it's a romance. So I'm like, do I want to read on? Because like that was not what I got out of it, and that wasn't what I wanted from it.
So what I will say, I thought the same thing. I was like, I don't think that's what this is though. And then in the second one, it's a lot of scheming. So I think the second one
I like the second one.
Yes, the second one, it really embraced the they can't lie thing really well. And how she played around with that I thought was good. And then the third one, I feel like I can't talk about it because it's,
I've heard a lot of mixed things about the last one. So
likewise, Grisha is probably coming out because the show is in production.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they just
you didn't know?
Grisha.
Yeah,
I thought you said I thought you were talking about Folk of the Air. I was
Oh,
like,
no.
It's going to Netflix, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. See, I think I never read the Grisha trilogy, and I don't think I will. I think I'm just going to watch the show.
So
Yeah,
I
that'll be cool.
I'll add that the show is, I think Lee Bardugo said, it's not really following the books exactly. It's more like, she said something like the best fan fiction you can imagine. Is something like
in that world with those characters.
I'm down for
they're just
that.
from Six of Crows too, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like the whole world.
Which I read that. Yeah.
I feel bad, Jesse. You've dipped in and out. So I feel like we need to get some of your thoughts.
Did you want to jump in? Did you have something you were trying to say?
I'm super happy to hear people think it's surprisingly good, the Grisha trilogy, because I keep hearing more negative thoughts now. Like you said, Elle, this series definitely goes in waves where everyone seemed to love it when it first came out. And then it was, I think, more popular to hate it after that. And now it sounds like everybody's loving it again, which might be due to the show, which I'm super excited about. I really enjoyed it. It's very tropey. You know, I think it reads a lot younger.
I mean, it came out in like what, 2012 or something. It's so it's very different than some of the stuff that's getting published these days. And I mean, obviously, I really enjoyed reading YA back in like 2012. So like, I don't mind the tropey stuff, the kind of romance that was in it. But I think that some people, if they're not used to it or that's not what they expect, like old school YA isn't what they like, then, you know, they might not like it.
Yeah, I think a lot like the main romance.
What was that?
I just didn't like the main romance. I know people either love it or hate it, but I was like, I didn't like the main character. I thought she was very boring. And I really didn't like her love interest either, but I guess they can be together because they're both bland, so it's fine.
That's what everybody says.
They were made for each
good
other.
for each other, yeah.
I don't like Mal, but I do love Alina. She just went through it for her.
I need to reread it because I don't remember anything.
The other thing about it going in waves is that like people who pick it up now are people who've been hearing mostly bad things about it.
Right.
And so then they go in expecting it to be bad, and then it's better than they thought.
It's not bad. It's like a decent series. Like the series is like a 3.5 to 4 star series for me. Like, you know, like it's fine. Like it's not bad, but it's not amazing. I don't know.
I remember when I finished the last book, I was bawling. I cried so hard at the end. I love it. I'm a huge Melina fan, so
you and Leanna.
Yeah.
I did not like it. I liked the series, but I didn't like the romance part of it very much. I didn't like the character. I don't want to say who for anybody that doesn't know, but I was like, yeah, why? This guy just like be alone. Like that's kind of how I felt. And then when I reread it, I liked it way more. I don't know, because I was reading it more from their point of view, even though you don't get their point of view. Because I already knew the girl. So then I was trying to imagine like the way he saw things. I'm like, you know what, man, I kind of get it. I kind of get why you're acting so obnoxious. So
I just really like the Darkling, but I don't like Alina and the Darkling together. I just like the Darkling. Like
just a whole book with him.
I popped up.
I have feelings on this one.
That's okay. So this one came up under disappointing.
Yeah.
Oh. I don't think
I would
that's
agree.
Okay. You thought it was disappointing too? I thought you really liked it.
No,
I thought you really didn't like it.
Man,
I didn't hate it. It was like
someone else.
oh yeah, no. Okay, so like I really liked as like what they gave out to reviewers initially was the first 20% of the book. It's like 900.
It's like the wrong book. I was thinking of the new Aaron Morgenstern.
No,
that's one of your
favorite.
Paolini?
I do love.
Okay.
That's the new Paolini.
Now we're on the same page.
Yeah. No, but they gave out the first 20% of the book. It's like 900 pages. It's really long. And I know. And the first 20% was great. I was like, this is so cool. And then after that, it was like very not great. I didn't like it. And the main character is a woman, and like I don't feel like he did a great job.
Oh man.
That sucks.
Yeah.
How so? Was there like something in it that was weird?
Yeah, there were a couple of
Did she describe her nude form once or more than once? That to me is like the
not
hallmark.
exactly,
About
but like
the alien suit, right?
Okay, so she ends up, this happens pretty early on, so it's not really spoilery, but like she ends up in this like weird alien suit thing. So one of the first things she does, she doesn't know what the thing is, it's on her body, and one of the first things she does is checks whether it's covering her genitals and is worried about whether it would like hurt a man's genitals if she had sex. I'm like, yeah, this is not probably the first thing you're concerned about, like when you have an alien thing on your body. Like,
do you guys follow the Twitter account Men Writing Women? Because it is,
it's a Reddit.
Oh, yeah, it's amazing.
it's so great. Oh my gosh. Yeah, that checks out.
I still don't understand. Wait, what did she was thinking it would have hurt a guy?
well, because she learns how to mentally like slightly move it off parts of her bare skin, and so she's like, maybe I could open it up, but what if it accidentally shut in the middle and like cut it off or something?
Oh, I see. Yeah, that's definitely the first thought I would
top
have.
priority. Yeah, definitely top.
Right.
Wouldn't even if you were like thinking about that region, wouldn't your first thought be more about like your
Going to
monthly
the bathroom.
cycle rather than
Your own bodily.
Yeah,
your own needs?
No, I always think
Yeah.
about men entering me
First.
when I'm an alien
First
suit.
thought right there.
Whoa, I came into this conversation at a very weird time. Oh my God.
We're not going to explain it. You can just make your own guesses.
So wait, okay. We'll fill Jesse in. So in this book, the chick gets an alien suit, and then she's thinking about like she can open parts of it up because it's kind of like against her, and so she's according to Bethany at one point has a thought like, okay, well if I open it up so that I can have sex, and then what will it close and then like chop things off for the guy, and so that's what
That would be your first thought, right? The second you're in this alien suit.
But I have to ask: is her love interest like with her at least? Is there?
No. So well, okay. So no.
She's just thinking about going to the club. Like what, totally doing a day worker Saturday
In
night.
fact,
Casual hookup in the bathroom.
Yeah.
Okay, so look, this spoils the first like 3 chapters of the book.
Okay, here I'll write spoilers. I'll write spoilers.
Okay.
For us.
Okay.
When the spoilers banner is
Out
gone.
of the 900-page book, like I think.
I mean, it's not much, but
Okay.
like she spends the first chunk of it grieving the death of her fiance.
Okay.
Like,
So then she.
So sex is on the mind, right? Is what I'm hearing.
fiance just died. That's ridiculous.
Oh my God.
Definitely, if my husband died, I would be thinking about sleeping with another dude. And if
Yeah,
it get cut off by
promptly.
my alien suit.
right.
Oh my good
'Cause
God.
priorities.
This is what happens when we have a bunch of girls in the video. I'm just imagining if Alan were here right now. I feel like
You'd be like, oh my God.
I'm just like waiting to see the chat later, like the comments.
Yeah. Oh my God.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
well,
then-
anybody say that they like this one?
I didn't like Aragon, so
Yeah, I
I
didn't
never
either.
read it.
I liked it at the time, but like I was, 18 or something. I don't know.
yeah.
So another one that came up, and this one I was surprised to see this one come up under disappointing, which actually I think this one will be good. I don't know if you guys have read this. Let me write it in so that people watching. But Mexican Gothic came up under disappointing.
Mm.
Yeah.
I love it
Oh,
so
you
much.
just pierced
It's one of my
Bethany's
favorite books
sweet
I've
little
read
heart.
this year.
So I've seen one person, I think, and I feel so bad if I'm misrepresenting, but Bow Ties and Books, they, I think, hated it. And that was the only, and so I remember seeing it and thinking, oh, well, I'll hold off. And then everyone else has liked it. So I'm like, I really want to know.
I think Books and Lala was so on it, but pretty much everyone else I've seen has really enjoyed it.
I loved it. I mean, I do think
Jesse says so.
I do think like it was not like people's expectations of it early on were maybe not appropriate. Like there were people who were saying they thought it was YA. There were people who thought it was gothic romance, which it's not. It's gothic horror, definitely horror. And I also think there are people whose ideas of what is scary or what horror should be is very like
Right.
like Eurocentric, I guess is the way to say
Yeah.
it. Because like a lot of the horror things are ways of tackling issues like colonization and misogyny and the colonization of the body and racism, and like that's what the horror is like representative of. And so if you're not picking up on that, you're like, this isn't that scary, but like
yeah, that makes sense. That
does
always
make
makes a bummer
sense.
when that happens, though. Like when a book gets kind of like misrepresented or marketed, or just the initial. I feel like that's what happened. Not to get off on another book, but Black Leopard, Red Wolf, like because so many people then who wouldn't have picked it up in the first place had they known more realistically what it was, they wouldn't have even picked it up. So then it wouldn't have been getting their like disappointed reviews. You know what I mean? I feel like that I could see that having happened here too.
I think that happened with and Jesse, I think you feel this way, Spin the Dawn, because it actually was a traveling love story, like kind of whimsical, but they marketed it as a Mulan Project Runway, like retelling, basically not retelling Project Runway, but I just said it out of order. But I mean, I that's
part of it is that
when I talk about it, I try really hard to always say this is honestly a traveling love story, so that people go in with the right expectations.
Yes, I agree. And I think for me, Mexican Gothic, I'd heard a lot of people talk about it and call it like scary horror. And I like scary horror. I'm like, yes. And like Bethany was saying, I think some of the things, if you don't pick up on them, it's not scary per se. And I think everybody has a different definition of what scary to them.
Right.
So like this is body horror, and that like doesn't scare me really. So I think it depends on your definition. I think horror is tough because everything is very subjective as to like what scares who. So
well, and I think too, I don't read a lot of horror, but like I can't read horror that is like jump scare type stuff, or like, I don't know, demon possessed children or something like that. Like really like, oh God, like if it was a movie, I would be like sitting like this I can't do that. But if it's just like an eerie, like atmospheric, like kind of just creepy. And I feel like sometimes books are that, but people who really want it to be like, holy crap, I can't read this, like, you know, books in the freezer type of thing, right? Like the really, really scary stuff, I got to put it away. And that'll be very disappointing if they're expecting or wanting that. And then it's just like eerie, creepy, atmospheric, etc.
Right.
Yeah. When I talk about horror books, I always try to say what was scary about it so that it doesn't, like you all are saying, doesn't misrepresent it. Like this is body horror type scares. So if that's scary to you, I think you would really enjoy this. Maybe enjoy is a weird word for that, but you know what I mean? This would scare you. And if that's not something that scares you, this might not be scary, but it might still be a good book for you. So it's just kind of setting the expectation appropriately.
Yeah, and I wonder, because I think some of the critiques sound like possibly similar to some of the ones that came up for Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires. And in that case, some of the critiques I saw, I thought were kind of missing the thematic content of the book, because I saw some people saying like, oh, I felt like this wasn't a good portrayal of Black people, or like that this was like had racist elements. And it's like, well, that's the point of of the book. The book is a horror novel about white flight. So I wonder if maybe also since, the author for Mexican Gothic is coming from a very specific place in terms of some of her thematic content, maybe that just like didn't connect with people.
I saw someone with on a negative review of Southern Book Club's guide saying that it was just entirely and I mean, it's everybody's interpretation. I'm not saying this person is wrong, right? But that it was a white savior complex. And I was like, but none of them wanted to save them. Like that, what?
Except also, the end of the book is literally like critiquing that. Like that's literally like and what happens in the last scenes.
At the end too, like if it had only been these white women, like they wouldn't have been able to do it. Like they would have died.
Literally.
They had to have Black woman help. Like I don't want to spoil anything, but like so I think just different experiences that people have, or different life journeys and whatnot, can definitely kind of cloud how they're representing what they read.
Yeah, I've heard that that's kind of a topic that's going on with horror books right now, is that what you feel is scary isn't necessarily what's scary when you're talking about these bigger themes. Yeah. And when you have like, you know, the majority of the population and a lot of people in the US are white or European, and like I don't read a lot of horror, so I think it's really interesting to kind of be an outsider hearing all this, because I'm like freaking scared about everything. So everything scares me. So but switching gears here a little bit. This one showed up under disappointing. So Jessie actually submitted this. But she was not the only one. There were other people that
Hot take time.
Oh no.
I feel like Jessie, you're like praying your internet goes out again.
I can't even see the banner because my internet's so slow, so you'll have to tell me.
It's the 5th season.
Oh. Okay. I feel like I need to clarify. This one is not one that I disliked, but I was expecting to love it. So I think that's where there's a difference.
Like the hype got you, maybe.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it just went a little over my head. I don't think my brain can handle big ideas, and I was just very confused.
That's how I felt the first time I read it. I want to read it again.
Another Minecraft.
Yeah, she did.
I mean,
we buddy read it, didn't we, Al? Like,
we started to. That was like,
you DNF'd it, right?
Yes. Well, because I was like, I don't like second person point of view, and I was like, I don't want to. But that's the thing, is like, I don't know. I could potentially, but I'm so basic. I'm like the definition of a basic girl. Because I like fancy storytelling. I'm always like, we'll see. Like, this is gonna be. I might not. So like the Knife and Never Letting Go I read recently, which I did like, but even then, hearing about it, hearing about it, I was like, I don't know. So 5th season, just it could be very good. The themes sound great, but I was like,
oh my gosh, the whole trilogy is like a masterpiece. It's brilliant. Like,
I feel like N.K. Jemisin is just a genius.
Well, that's what I heard. Everyone loved it. I was like, oh my god, I'm prepared. I'm mentally prepared to have my mind blown. And
I mean, it does like take, you have to pay close attention, and like you have to really like you can't just like take it in, you have to interact with it. It's like the kind of text that you have to like think about and unpack. Like, it would be a great book club book, you know, because it's got so much going on.
Yeah.
I want to reread it soon, because I also tried when I first read it. It was on audio, and I have since learned that audiobooks, fantasy audiobooks, for my first go around with a book is not the business for me. Like, I don't listen to audiobooks that much anyway, because I just
particularly for those, because they're very dense. Like, there's
it was not the right choice.
It
was a poor life choice. But also, I recently read The Killing Moon, and I just think I might be too dumb for N.K. Jemisin, because my brain cells were like, what is going on? Or why are we doing this? Why are we doing this thing in the story? Like, why are we telling the story this way? I don't, and I'm like, I think she's a genius, and I just might be too stupid.
I know she's really smart. Like, way too smart for me.
She has a plan. It all makes sense eventually.
Yeah, I really liked her short story collection, How Long Till Black Future Month. That was great. And then I also really enjoyed The City We Became, but I've been putting off the 5th season basically for the reason that you're talking about, Jessie, which was I was worried. It's been so hyped to me that I kind of just wanted to give it some space. But Jashawn, if you decide you want to reread, let me know, because I feel like that would be a good one to have a friend along for the ride with.
The whole thing. I would reread them. I want to reread them.
Yeah. So I read her short story collection earlier this year as like my first introduction, and I'm really unsure, because there was probably like 5 stories in it that I liked, and there were so many that I was like, I have no idea what's going on. So I totally understand what you guys mean about her being like really genius, but not like getting it. And I'm worried that I'm going to be that way for her other books. I really want to read the 5th season and that trilogy, because I think the themes explored I'm really going to like, and I like the blend of like sci-fi and fantasy. I actually think I might start with the Dreamblood duology with The Killing Moon.
That's what I mean.
You're making me nervous, Shoshana, the way you just described
it. It's not okay. Compared to the 5th season, it's definitely not as bad. There were just certain there was one thing in particular that kept happening, and I talked about it in a review, but like for me in my head, there was no reason that information was being withheld from me as the reader, because then when it was revealed, it didn't make a difference in the plot. But I think it's just her writing style, like how she tells the story. And it was really just this one element that I was like, why are you withholding this from me? It made it, and I'm a reader that gets distracted by that because my brain goes, ooh, this is big. Then we're not being told everything. So it must be a big deal. And I get like, I'm like a little squirrel that's like, oh, over here, this must be a big important thing. And then when it's not, I'm very like frustrated. Like, well, I
can see that. But one of the 5 stories in the short story collection that I really liked was like the one that's set in the Dreamblood world.
It's very cool.
So I was like, maybe I should start with that one. And I also usually don't like going backwards in someone's work, because in general, they get better as they, So I like to read the older stuff first. So I think next year I'm going to try to read the Dreamblood duology and then the 5th season.
Yeah. I have a question and a possible follow-up depending on the answer. For those that like it or have interacted with the fans of N.K. Jemisin's work, because we have this kind of, I'm not smart enough for this. Do you find that the fandom for her works is really nice in telling people like, I'd be happy to like chat about it and discuss the theme and stuff? Or are they like, do they tend to get aggressive like you just didn't get it?
No.
I find that very I was gonna say it's most people I know who've read it enjoyed. It's more like, ooh, like, I get it. Like it's a lot, but like, this is why like, it's a geeky love, not a like, well, I don't know how you missed this.
So I'm wondering, why do you think there's such a contrast between fans of N.K. Jemisin, which a lot of people elevate this to be kind of a very intellectual fantasy? Why do you think the fandom behaves that way versus fandoms of other fantasy books where they do have the, little child, you just didn't get it?
I mean,
I think,
do we have to say it
herself?
We'll let the comments decide why it seems like other fandoms are that way.
I think an author, to an extent, of course, just like anybody who, on some level, an author can be considered like they're a content creator, right? We're content creators. We have some level of control over the audience that we cultivate. Obviously, there's outliers. And when you're an author on this level, like you're going to have all kinds of people. Right. But generally, you have a little bit of control over what kind of audience you cultivate, what you accept, how you talk about your works, how you talk about the content that you create, and how you talk to your audience. And I think therein lies the difference.
Well, and I think there's also, and like maybe a more, like the more positive side of that maybe, or like the more optimistic take, is that I think there's a lot of people who have not seen themselves represented in major SFF releases for a very long time. So it may in part be just like joy of like, here is this Black woman who is like slaying at the Hugos every year. Like she is out there getting this recognition and writing these kinds of stories. So it may be like, because that is something that is really celebratory, it cultivates
it's
a
like
likewise
joyful,
positive.
Like
you're coalescing around something that you're excited and positive about, and not.
I will say, as well as like the thematic stuff that she's exploring is really about like undercutting racism and patriarchy and like, oppressive systems of government. And, it's about acceptance and love. And like, I don't like even though things get very, very dark in her books, like at its core, like those are a lot of what it's about. So I mean, thematically, I don't know.
Yeah.
I found recently, so I've had The Witcher. I started out discussing a lot about Witcher, and that I've taken videos down because the amount of comments that I would get that were just like disgusting. And I was like, okay, well, there's a video game associated with this. There's a whole other fandom. So like, I guess that's just what this one is. And then the Sanderson fandom, I feel like for a long time, Sanderson, I think, seems like pretty nice. If you go to his website, he's like, people ask me what they can get me for like my birthday and stuff. He's like, here's a bunch of charities. I'd rather you donate to them. And like, he seems like a nice guy. And recently, the fandom has been getting crazy. Like, you guys know Leanna's gotten death threats, but even people who like his books, I have seen all over the place when they're talking about Rhythm of War. They're getting really crazy comments. I've been getting crazy comments, and I'm like, what's going on now? Because I would agree, Bethany, like thematically, I think it plays a role. How the author behaves plays a role. And I can't figure out this time around, like, what the heck is going on?
Well, look, I mean, if we're being honest, it could be that there's a fan base that is very angry about other political things right now, and that might be getting taken out there. I mean, if you have a fan base that is more white, more conservative, and they're pissed off about other stuff right now, like,
You think it's frustration?
I think it's probably frustration with the election, with COVID, and that's probably a lot of what's fueling more.
That's
of it.
interesting.
That
so you
is
think
really
it's more
interesting.
an outside, like an outside thing coming. We're all projecting.
Well, and actually, it's interesting you say that, Bethany, because Witcher. So I read The Witcher for the first time this year, and I enjoyed it. But before that, really, my main association was with the video game, and it was with. I don't know if you guys have ever watched the YouTuber H Bomber guy, but he made this incredible takedown of a very like scary alt-right guy called the Chosen One, or the Golden One. That's what he calls himself. And he's always playing The Witcher and talking about how it like feeds into all of this like anti-Semitic, like neo NAZI stuff. I don't want to get us demonetized, but like all of this like really like white nationalist like BS. So, you know, I think that there is a certain component of especially SFF fandoms that are aligned with some of those ideas. And maybe to your point, Bethany, this has not been as good of a year for them as it has been the last couple of years. So maybe they're feeling a little agitated about that. So
Interesting. I wouldn't have thought about that at all, but I think you guys are onto something. It makes sense.
Yeah.
People
actually, and it's so funny because when I read The Witcher, I was like, I actually think that this is kind of subversively feminist in a lot of ways. So it was really surprising to me when I read it for myself and was like, I'm surprised this has been so co-opted by these super alt-right guys.
He just casually has like lesbian characters and like gay characters. And what's funny, it is a little frustrating because there's certain elements like Yennefer's character I actually think has a lot of depth. And but then like the author will occasionally throw in something that I'm like, oh dang it. Like, why is this here?
Yeah. But I mean, I think at least the Last Wish to me just felt like a commentary on the perceived monstrosity of women. Like that seemed to be the theme. And I was like, I guess if you're reading this on the surface, you're maybe could have misogynistic ideas fed from that, but he seems to be trying to undercut that and like comment on it.
Really funny though is that so much of the fandom hates Yennefer. I'm like, which is fine. We don't.
I mean, but
you don't have to like her. But I just think it's funny that I feel like things he's done with that character, and then turns out people hate her. I was like, well, I don't know how many of us have read this, but for people watching, Peace Talks and Battleground from the Dresden Files was under disappointing. And
really?
Yes. So I've seen a lot of people quite disappointed with this. But it'll be interesting to see if other people loved it. I kind of like know what happens. I guess there's some stuff in there that people are pretty disappointed with, but has anyone here read much Dresden Files?
I'm behind, so I have no idea where it's at this point, but I'll catch up someday.
I have the first book on my TBR, but I've never read them. So
same. It's been sitting there for years.
So the next one
it's not as good as Kate Daniels.
The next one was under surprising, and Jade, this will make you happy. It's the Murderbot.
I love that too. Yay. That does make me happy. I'm not surprised that that's surprising because it doesn't sound like much on the surface, but they're so fun. I've only read the first two, but I'm hoping to read 2 more very soon. But they're just like a nice sci-fi romp, good laugh.
And your neighborhood murdering robot. Like, it's wonderful. And I think
reality TV. I mean,
yeah, who doesn't, right? Yeah. I think what was surprising was how good the first full-length novel was. Because you just never know. Like, the first 4 are all novellas, and they're, I think, really good. I mean, the first one to me is a masterpiece. But I was really impressed with how good the first, like, what was it, 350-page story in the series went. Like, I think it was really
good. I'm excited to get to that one because like a character from the second book is in it that I like love so much, and so I'm very much.
Yes, you're gonna be.
You're not ready.
I'm not ready. Oh no!
It's so good.
Oh, I can't wait. But the new one she's coming out with is another novella, and I'm like, no. Why don't you just stick with novels? Why are you going back to the short?
Well, it's fun. I'd rather her write the length of story she has to tell. But this gets into my bias of like I get mad when things are overwritten. I'm like, okay,
nice little like pick me ups in between and like palette cleansers in between some of this like long stuff I've been reading and stuff, and they're really fun, and the audiobooks are really good. I don't know if you guys have listened to them.
They're really good. Yeah, I listened to the audiobooks. Oh, you haven't? Yeah, the audiobooks are fantastic. They're really good. They're on Scribd, I think.
Yes.
Okay, maybe I'll have to give it a try.
Is it they do like a certain specific narration for the? Like, is it slightly different because it's a robot, or does it talk like a person?
He's not a robot.
Oh, okay, I don't know.
Yeah, no. He's a biological AI. So he's artificial intelligence in a biologically grown body.
Oh, okay.
And it's all from his perspective. It's in like first person from in his head. It's great.
But isn't it supposed to be gender neutral?
Yeah, right? It's their head. Yeah,
their head. You're right. I'm sorry.
Okay, no, I just wanted to ask because I've heard people say that they read the first one and then they tried to listen to the audiobook for the second one, and they had a female voice in their head, and the narrator had a male voice.
Yeah, when you said that in my head, I think of Murderbot as like somewhat female presenting, so that actually surprised me.
Yeah, so
I listened to the audiobook, so I think of Murderbot as more male because the voice is more male.
And I've always thought of it as more male, so when I talk about it in videos, I have to like really try to use gender neutral terms because I think that it's a male, but it's not.
Yeah.
Is the body like capable of reproducing or anything, like, or is it
I don't think it has any sexual organs.
Okay, I don't think it's not been outfitted with any kind of reproductive like add-ons. You know, like on your KitchenAid, how you have like a pasta maker, like it hasn't had that bolt on, I don't think.
Well, and I think a lot of people talk about Murderbot as being like an asexual character as well, which
that makes sense.
That would be fun too, because I feel like a lot of fantasy, I asked a while back and I wanted to make a video on it, and I'm like, everybody feels exactly the same except for they think they feel totally different. So I asked everybody, what's your number one complaint about YA fantasy versus adult fantasy? Like, what's your number one complaint with adult and then young adult? And both areas was romance. And I'm like, you guys, just romance and fantasy sucks. But Jesse and I have talked about this.
Wrong.
I agree. Wrong.
No, we can have a whole video about speculative romance.
Yes.
According to like what people are complaining about a lot of the time. So what's funny though, Jesse and I have talked about this before, is the way in which we talk about it, because when we talk about it with young adult, we say, oh, it's always like shoehorned in, even when it doesn't need to be. But then with adult, it's like when you're talking about it positively, it's like, oh, I appreciated that the romance was just a subplot. And I'm like, this is so you like when there's a minor amount in adult, but then when there's a minor amount in young adult, you say it's shoved in. And it's like, it's so funny the differences, and it's like the same thing.
But the thing that drives me crazy about that, and like I want to take the point, there are some people who genuinely don't want a big romantic element. Right. But the reason, like Sarah J. Maas writes romances. They are romances that have their speculative romance. But because of the cultural stigma in online communities, people do not feel free to just say that they like romance. Right. So even when you ask people things that they don't like, I feel like it is overly skewed towards saying they don't like romance. But if you actually like analyze the things that they enjoy about books, so much of it, or so many people, a big part of it would be romance. So that is my like crusade, is like, let's get rid of the internalized misogyny that says that you are not allowed to like some smooching or some like googly eyes at each other in your book. Like, come on. People.
So, okay, 100% I agree with the idea where, so for a long time, I was like, I don't really, and to be fair, when I read fantasy, I usually don't want it to be split like fantasy romance, right? That's because I usually want it to be leaning more fantasy, but I've come to realize like every now and then I am in the mood for that. It's not that like, but I think it's just instinctive to be like embarrassed that you like fantasy. But what bothers me is it's like, okay, I don't think most of us would dislike it if it was done well. And there's some books where it's done so poorly, where it's just like, by the way, these characters love each other now. And it's not developed. But then I feel like it's not developed because people think, kind of talking about our expectations of fantasy, especially adult, we think like it has to be a subplot or it has to just like, oh, readers don't care about this. And what I don't, it's not that I need a romance, but I care about the romance as much as I care about any of the relationships between characters, whether it's siblings or friendships or enemies. If you're going to have it, I care about it being done well. That's kind of the way I see it.
Well, and I think Bethany and I are similar in this respect that we both tend to really like character-driven books in a lot of ways. And part of what I enjoy about romance is that it necessitates it being a character-driven book. So a lot of times I will go to fantasy romance or fantasy with a heavy romantic element. Like I would call The Wolf and the Whale by Jordana Max Brodsky. That's to me one I always recommend to people who are interested in something that's about 50-50 in its genre. It's so cool. It's really good. And it's like it's Inuit/Viking epic fantasy. And the main character is gender like dual spirited basically. She uses she, her, but they believe that her dad like inhabits her. So she's equally male and female in her tribe. Anyway, like that to me, what I like about it is that it's very character focused. So like it is an epic fantasy and there is a romance, but like because of the romantic element, it ends up being very focused on characters. So like, I think romance when done well can be a really good either add-in or it can be a way. Like, I also love true romances that also just have speculative elements in them. But I think there is a range that exists, but it's so stigmatized. Like people see it done poorly so often, and they don't know where to go to get good recommendations for it being done well.
Yeah.
To you guys, that's where.
I mean, we read a lot of it, so we like it. I also appreciate too when there are people trying to do well. It was funny. I did a romance themed live stream recently, and an author got in the chat and was asking him questions, which was really interesting. So, have you guys read Brian D. Anderson's books? So he wrote he's written a couple. He was indie published before, but this year Tor published two of his books as like an epic kind of adult fantasy, and he has romance in his books. And it was interesting because he was asking questions about like romantic scenes and like what we thought about how they should or shouldn't be written, and like what's too explicit for a fantasy. And like it was really interesting questions and conversation that ended up coming out of it, and I appreciate it. I was like, I'm so glad you're like thinking about this. And he talked about that he reads romances to try to learn how to do that. Like he reads romance novels to like try to learn how to read
some Ice Planet Barbarians.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that might not be quite perfect. Yeah. Fair enough. But I was like, so smart, right? Like, what if we can destigmatize it? Like, male authors, if you want to write good romance, like read some romance novels and like learn how to do it well. I thought that was great.
Reminds me of like the premise behind Bromance Book Club.
Yes,
exactly. The fantasy version of that.
Yeah. I think I've realized this year that, and I mean, it's not that I just realized I really like romance. I love Sarah J. Maas. I mean, and
you
that's why I'm like,
Stackhouse.
But yes, I mean, well, I don't.
Well, I mean, it's your origin story.
Yes, that's my fantasy origin story.
Yeah.
But I just got away from reading like fantasy romance, and I don't know why. I don't know. I think I just got distracted with all the other things. But I read A Promise of Fire by Amanda Bouchet or something.
Yeah.
And it's like Greek mythology and, this kick butt warrior chick and like whatever. And then there's like this romance happening. And there's elements that I don't love about it as the series continues. And I was like, I love this. Like, I love it. It's like,
have you read Alona Andrews, Shoshana?
I haven't, but it's on my. I wanted to for so
long.
You
gotta. I mean, they're my favorite. But I think you should read either Kate Daniels or the Hidden Legacy series, or actually the Innkeeper series. I got Bethany reading that this year.
Super fun.
But they write a really good mix of like, it's solid urban fantasy with an overarching romance.
Yeah, I think that like I've tried historical romance, and contemporary romance is not my jam. And like the historical, I think I could do, but I haven't found something that's like, I have a few on my list. But fantasy romance, I'm like, give me more of it, man.
So I have to say, the last book that came up was under Disappointed, and I think it kind of fits this conversation a little bit, given some of the chats that we've had.
Oh, no. Bethany, I feel like this is like a personal attack on you.
Oh, no, well, I love Name of the Wind. No, but I get it. Like, it's not everybody's cup of tea. It just depends. I think it depends on like what kind of writing style you like and what you want out of your fantasy. I love it. I think it's beautiful. It's got very lyrical writing. It does. And I love the characters. I love the journey, but I know there are a lot of people who don't and have different issues with it. I also just think it's brilliant. Like, his world building is so good and it's so smart. And he thinks about like the structure of the economy and how it would affect things across borders and like the political, like there, and it's not info dumped to you. You learn little bits and pieces here and there, but like he thought about all of it. It's so smart. And the writing is just beautiful. I love it a lot. But I mean, it's one of those things, like some of my favorite books, like The Name of the Wind, like The Starless Sea, are ones that not everybody enjoys because they are slower paced, they have more lyrical writing, they're like, not everybody's into that type of storytelling.
I think it's interesting that Name of the Wind is as popular as it is, because I think it doesn't necessarily fit what you would expect from fantasy. I mean, I think interestingly right now, we've talked about Sanderson a little bit, and he's kind of like the person in fantasy right now, like on BookTube and on Bookstagram, like everybody's all about Sanderson and stuff. But when you compare him to someone like Rothfuss or like their storytelling, it's so different. It's very different. And I think it's kind of interesting that Name of the Wind has done so well because it doesn't really go quite with, it's almost like it could be sold in just fiction. You know how the Night Circus is sold in fiction, but you see it on fantasy lists of best of, or I feel like this one also could be sold in fiction as well.
Yeah, that makes sense. I've never had an interest to read it because I just have a feeling that I wouldn't really care for it. So I'm like, I'll pass on that one. But maybe someday.
Leanna bugged me for months until I finally read it, and then I read it in 3 days. So,
oh my gosh!
Wow, in 3 days, it's really long.
I couldn't put it down. I was like, "Oh my god, this is amazing! I love it so much. It's so good."
It's so funny.
Yeah, I read it all in 3 days.
I really want to read it, but I'm worried it'll never get finished, and
I'm not starting it. I won't even think about starting it until it's finished.
You know what? I would totally read it when it's finished, but until then, I'm holding off.
I think he just did a thing online talking about it. Like he finally was answering questions about it, didn't he?
I saw that. I didn't know if it was a recent video.
I haven't looked at it.
It said it was.
I didn't watch it. It was recommended to me by.
Yeah, it came out like 3 days ago or something at the time we're recording this.
Interesting.
But I don't know if it was from a recent, like that had just happened, or if it's something from before. I think it's got to be recent because a couple of the comments were like, "Thanks so much for talking about it." And
so. Is the third one supposed to be the last one, or is there supposed to be more?
Well, so he made a comment several months ago that was kind of funny, saying like, "I'm even worse than you think I am because I'm making you wait for 3 really long books that are just a very, very long prologue."
Oh,
because it's a frame story, right? So like each book is a day of Kvothe later life and Kvothe telling his story, right? But like there's plot stuff happening in the modern day, and none of that's going to get resolved. Like this is just to getting you up to date of like where he is now and
his
why
reputation.
he's the yeah, how he got there.
At
And
least
then
Mara.
arc
Yeah.
with that.
I don't mind, I just like, I love it and I love the world so much that like, even though it's not finished, I would still reread it. I think there's lots to
That's
talk
how I
about.
am with Sanderson. I was gonna wait until the 5th book was coming out to read the Stormlight Archives, because that's supposed to be like one arc, but then I just got like too excited about it, and I'm like, whatever, I'm just gonna reread all 4 of them anyway, so it's all good.
I had a good laugh though. I saw on Reddit somewhere. I wish I could remember the exact wording, but basically Rothfuss said something along the lines of, well, you have to read it more than once to appreciate everything I did. And I'm just kind of like, okay.
This conversation is just like decreasing my interest in reading this, just like with every moment that goes along. I'm like, no.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Some books have fantastic rereadability, and like you are going to get more out of it the second time. But I'm like, I would never say that about my own. Like, well, you're not going to catch everything. And in hindsight, like I would never say that about my.
It's like you just said that out loud.
Okay, look. That is actually, that's like one of my favorite things an author can do, though. Like, I love series where authors intentionally put clues and Easter eggs in early books that you would never catch onto until you reread it, and that's what he does, and I love that. Like Susan Dennard does that.
I was gonna say, but would Susan Dennard say that in an interview to someone?
Like, you'll have to read it
Well,
again.
you're gonna have to read it a few times.
I'm gonna look for it while we discuss.
She would probably put it in a nicer way. Like,
is the Witchland series
like she wouldn't be a jerk about it.
Like the Witchland series. That's
like
actually how me and Bethany became. Sorry, I keep pointing to Jessie because I'm backward. That's how me and Bethany became friends, was because she invited me to do a Witchlands group read. And it's really good, but it really demands you remembering a lot of details from the prior books. So I'm actually paused on the series, and I'm going to wait till they all come out. I'm going to do a full read, because I think if you don't read them, reread before you read the new ones, you don't catch everything. And so anyway, but it's really good.
Because those are on my TBR. But that's what I love about We Love Time and Stormlight Archives, is like, that's what they do. Like, you don't you can read it just once through and enjoy the story, but if you read it, you pick up on so many Easter eggs that it like just makes it so much more fun.
I found the quote. It says, if you read my books only once, you kind of miss most of them. There's a lot in the books you simply cannot understand until your second read. There's a reason a lot of people read them more than once. I'm like, one of the reasons people read them more than once is because the third one's not out.
That sounds very pretentious.
I thought that
I mean, he's confident in his writing ability.
Good for him for having, I mean,
good.
And it sounds like his writing quality actually can back up that level of confidence. So like, good for him. I just, there's millions of books to read in this world, and that doesn't entice this reader to pick yours.
That's how I feel. Like I've already reread Mistborn. I want to read it again. There are books that I definitely want to go back and read multiple times. Like this whole discussion we're talking about with the Easter eggs and everything. Mm-hmm. But I mean, I think it's kind of funny to be like, you're going to miss most of it though. Like, well, sir, I don't want to miss the first time. I want to miss something.
Yeah,
for sure.
Because then I'm like, what am I even reading the first time then? If I'm missing most of it, then like the first time, that's like saying, I mean, my book sucks the first time.
It's not true though. Like it's hyperbole. It's totally hyperbole.
I mean, you know, I love Tolkien. I took a whole seminar in grad school on Tolkien, and like, yes, you can, you know, dig into every little description he has of every leaf in the woods. Like that's a part of the joy. But it also is just like a fun, like you could just read it once and like you're gonna get like the main bit. And to me, that's like, I think if someone can't get your book on the first read, unless you're like James Joyce, maybe not.
True. Like you can get the book on the first go around. It's just that like he probably likes all the stuff he's hidden in it, is what it is. Like
I'm sure he really likes what he's done.
We're
gonna have so many bad comments on this video, guys. I'm sorry.
Remember, it's for charity.
Sorry, I'm just a dumb woman. It's fine. You can just go ahead and put that in the comments. I know I'm just a dumb woman.
Do you think though that this is becoming? I actually I don't mind what he's saying, like that it's great to go back and read it again.
Sure.
But do you think we're getting to a point in like the gatekeeper mentality that if you don't read something more than once, you're not really a fan? Because I see this all the time in the Malazan Book of the Fallen thing. I've seen people say they've read those books 10 times. And like I've seen people say, oh, it's great to see new input on this, but you really don't get a grasp for it until at least your second or third read through. And I'm just like, why do we have to read things that many times?
No.
Like, we have one other books we're interested in, and also we have lives. Like, we can't just constantly.
It's a personality thing, because like that exact same fanboy is the same one who's like, well, James Joyce, like until you've read Ulysses 4 times, you don't begin to really understand just the third chapter or whatever. It's just like that. Like I make a lot of Agatha Christie reviews on my channel. There are Agatha Christie fanboys who come in and are like, you clearly know nothing about her. And I'm like, well, sir, I have like 80 reviews on my channel. So like maybe I've read at least a little bit from her. Like, I just think that there is a personality that cannot resist trying to feel superior to other people. And I just find that to be one of the least attractive personality traits one could have. Because if you enjoy something, isn't it fun to nerd out with people and like bring them in and not push them out?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
I mean, it's the same thing like the people who are like, well, you don't really understand a superhero character unless you've read all of the issues of all of the comics on all of the different series, and you're clearly missing these very important details. Like, it's the same sort of thing. Like, I think this exists everywhere. It's
with any fandom.
And sure, I mean, like, I'm sure there are things that you don't know. Like, I mean, of course, if you read all of something, you'll know more about it than somebody who hasn't. But like, I don't know.
That doesn't negate having an opinion on something. Like, you can have an opinion without having completed everything or read something multiple times.
Yeah. Like, you're not allowed to review anything on your channel unless you've read it 3 times.
Oh. Yeah. Didn't someone yell at Alan for not having read, like, hasn't he not read the last Malazan book? Speaking of Alan, I like that he is not that way, even though he reads all this. Like, did you guys watch his video about reading the Discworld series?
Yes.
It's so good. He's the first person who's ever convinced me that I should try reading something in Discworld. So I like bought one of the books that he recommended to start with. But like, that's the thing, is he's like read all of them multiple times, but he's not a jerk about it. He's like, okay, let me share my excitement and help give you good entry points for you too to come and enjoy this thing that I enjoy. And I'm like, see, that is it. Like,
I thought about making a video titled "Dear Fandoms, Stop Being A-Holes," because like, you know, please don't encourage people to share. Like, do you want the author to have continued success? Because if you do, stop behaving like an idiot. Like,
you're putting people off.
Yeah, you're putting people, and like, not only that, because I know that the mind mentality would be, well, you shouldn't read it because of the fandom. You should read it because it's good. Well, you should try to take on a better attitude in general, though, because if a jerk comes up to me and they're like, I don't understand that mind mentality. Like,
I'm not going to read any more Sanderson because I haven't hated anything from him, but the number of comments I get whenever he comes up on my channel, because I'm sort of just like, okay with what I've read, it's just not worth, like, at least as long as I'm making content publicly, I'm not reading anything else from him, because it's just honestly not fun for me.
I was so excited to do the in-depth chats, which I had so much fun with the people who were chill, normal human beings. But there were so many people, and I'm like, guys, I liked the book. But I'm like, the amount of times I was telling Jade about this, that people would be like, don't forget journey before destination. And I'm like, that doesn't mean I have to love every single word of this 1,200 plus book. Like, there are things about it. And sometimes it's not even a negative about the book. It's literally just like, in a good way, a character is annoying me. But like, they're behaving like a real person, and it's frustrating. Yeah. So I'll be like, like them doing this, like, oh, stupid this person. And people will be like, this is what you don't understand about this character though. And like, I'm like, what's going on, guys? Like sometimes the really, really, really kind of bitter part of me wants to be like, excuse me, how many people have you gotten like shown this to you know, like I'm not trying to be a jerk and say it's like mine and like everybody's read it because of me or something, but I'm like, I'm doing more for this than you.
You're doing the hard work of sharing the good news of Sanderson with the unaffiliated, and you know.
I just
Who have you converted today, sir, to the Church of Sanderson?
That's exactly what it's like. People treat. I don't understand.
I love it.
I don't know. Some people, it's just a personality trait. I think that to feel good about their own status, they have to make other people feel bad. And it's just a bummer because most people are not that way. And like, I love finding other people who are just nerds about this stuff. And like, you know, we can disagree passionately. I mean, I'm friends with Leanna. I'm okay with disagreeing passionately with people. Like, that's fine. It's just like, it's a matter of like, she and I can have opposite opinions on a book, but she's never going to make me feel like I'm an idiot because I disagree with her, because that's not how she feels.
It's so easy. For people that read a lot, you would think they would have a better ability to use their words, because it's not that hard to say, oh, interesting. This is how I saw it. That's it. That's all you gotta do. You don't gotta be like,
I am working with my 4-year-old on using his words instead of screaming, and we're making some progress. But like, he's
grown people have issues with it still.
I think a lot of it has to do with how much those people talk to other readers, because I mean, pre-booktube, like online book, like me reading book blogs and stuff, I definitely thought that like, if someone didn't like if I liked something, that meant it was a good book. And if I didn't like something, that meant it was a bad book. And if someone liked that, then they have bad taste. Like I definitely thought that before joining the online bookish internet. But the more you talk to people and the more you see like, hey, this person's not an idiot. Some of our tastes overlap and we like some of the same books, but some of the same books we have really opposite opinions on. That's when I started being like, okay, so it's all just opinions. Like they're not wrong. They're not idiots. We just like different things and that's okay. But until you get exposed to that, I feel like people just think that there are good books and bad books. And that's just not true.
Right.
And I think some of them just want to feel superior, and it makes them feel superior to be like, I liked it, and so that is correct, and you are stupid. You're wrong, or you're spreading misinformation because you've read it differently than me. What I get on Rage of Dragons.
Right. I mean, I might jokingly be like, how could you not like that book?
Yeah,
like,
for sure.
I understand that not everybody likes it. I mean,
the amount of times, and I mean, in our chats with everybody else in Worldhoppers, where about like with Alex and those of us that didn't like Rage of Dragons, for example, like dogging on each other, just giving each other heck about it.
Rage of Dragons was definitely brought up in the, you know,
surprising or disappointing.
I didn't bring it up though because it always gets brought up.
I can't decide if I want to read it or not, because I feel like it's so
love it or hate it.
I can't
and like people who I usually agree with have such split decisions or like split opinions that like I honestly can't tell if I would like it or not.
Very polarizing.
Honestly, Rage of Dragons is one I think everybody should read because there's a 50-50 chance you'll love it.
Just roll flip that coin. It could go either way.
You just gotta read it.
Seriously.
At the very least, there are some really, I feel like the Rage of Dragons Gush Fest, I wanted to put that out because it's like one that we're so divided on, even just within our group of, you know, friends, that it's like, look, we can have fun with this, even though we have disagreeing opinions. And there's so many cool people that like it, and there's cool people that don't like it at all. So anyway, well, on that note of people being buttholes and acting superior, thanks for watching, everybody. I thought this was going to be like pretty chill, and we got on some like really interesting side tangents. We talked about men's body parts getting cut off by aliens.
We didn't cover Blue Alien Peen. I mean, we could have done this. Next time when I come
Not
we can talk about that. Because I just did an hour vlog about that. So
could have went further. Oh man.
Well, it was a good old time. Let us know which books you thought were surprising and disappointing. Let us know your thoughts on fandoms and use your words, you know, and everybody will have a good time.
or memes. Or emojis. Those were good.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna end it now, guys. Thanks.
All right.
Bye.